This is the Canadian Taxpayers Federation podcast where we are dedicated to lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. I'm Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the CTF. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Franco Terrazzano. Franco, this is a little bit of a special edition of the podcast because we are fresh off of a speech from the throne. And for the nerds who follow us, it's literally called a throne speech because we are a constitutional monarchy. And in this case, His Majesty the King, Charles III, actually flew in from London for this and delivered the throne speech. In normal people talk, though, this is generally what will start a session of Parliament. And especially after an election where we have a new prime minister, this is going to kick off the politics season here in Canada. Franco, what jumped out at you? What was the actual substance? There's a lot of foo-for-ah about, how long they were here for and former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's ridiculous shoes. Like, there's all sorts of silliness going on. What jumped out at you substantively?
All right, let's start at the budget because, this is the thing I'm the most worried about is just this massive debt. Okay, so in the throne speech, the king talked about a promise to balance the operating budget. Balance the operating budget. Now, folks, we just got to cut through that spin right here because Carney has zero plan to balance the budget. Okay, zero plan to balance the budget. Carney's platform, his election platform, would add about $225 billion to the debt over 4 years. Okay, let me just read you the deficit numbers in his platform. 2025, $62 billion. 2026, $60 billion. 2027, $55 billion. The deficit in 2028, $48 billion. Okay, that isn't a balanced budget at all. That's tens of billions of dollars added to the debt every single year. In fact, over those same 4 years, Trudeau was planning to add $131 billion to the debt. So beep boop, do the math. And Carney is planning to add almost $100 billion more to the debt than what even Trudeau was planning to do.
Yeah, I remember where we were when we found out during the election campaign that the banker was going to be worse with money than the drama teacher. I really couldn't believe it. So what you're pointing out here for folks at home is that there's no such thing as just balancing your operating budget. It's either a balanced budget or not, right?
Yeah, either the debt is going up or the debt is going down. Okay? But if the debt is going up, you're not balancing the budget. In fact, that's more money wasted on interest charges. Oh, by the way, folks, interest charges on the debt are already costing taxpayers $1 billion every single week. Well, what's $1 billion? That's the cost of a brand new hospital that isn't getting built every week because that money's going to the bond fund managers on Bay Street to pay interest charges on the government debt.
Yeah, quick math here. For $1 billion a week, you could pay the salaries of 5,000 cops and 5,000 paramedics. The annual, salaries. That's how much money we're wasting on interest payments on the debt. I mean, that's just an outstanding amount of money. Speaking of an outstanding, outrageous waste of money, do we want to move on to our favorite state broadcaster, or would you still like to stick the budget under your fingernails for a little while?
Yeah, okay, we can move on to the state broadcaster, but I do want to talk about some of the other spending here. But let's go to the CBC.
For it.
Okay?
No, yeah.
So in the on the CBC, there was a quick kind of throwaway line that I caught because I'm, following that kind of stuff. And essentially, the government is protecting or promising to protect institutions like the CBC, like the state broadcaster, okay? Now, obviously very light on details, but the thing that jumps out on me, Kris, and you can weigh in on this, but number one, the CBC already costs taxpayers $1.4 billion every single year. And you'll remember that just before the election, the government mused about nearly doubling the amount of money that the CBC takes from taxpayers every single year, right? We crunched the numbers. We heard what the minister at the time was proposing, and that would have brought the CBC's annual funding close to $2.5 billion, up from the $1.4 billion it takes from taxpayers, every single year already. So that's just something that really got my attention. How much is the CBC, the state broadcaster, going to continue to soak taxpayers for years to come?
Yeah, that was a major issue. To your point, Franco, number one, it's going to be more than $2 billion with a B per year. So just an outrageous waste of money. And there's a couple other elements that the then Trudeau government and now the Carney government was talking about doing, namely that they were going to put it into basically law that we have to have a state broadcaster. Now, for folks at home again, if you're a legislator, if you're a member of parliament and you're in government, you can change the laws. That's the whole point. Like that's their whole job. But they wanted to enshrine it in a more solid fashion. And another element, which was really alarming, is that they wanted the mavens at the CBC to be the arbiters of truth. So, for folks who are following things like Bill C-63, where they're looking at major censorship laws, possibly going through here in Canada, so what you say online, whether or not it's true, they wanted folks who are already employed at the CBC to be deciding what is and is not true. Like, if you start getting into like state level journalism like that, you are in some really dangerous territory. Not only is this a huge waste of money, not only does nearly nobody watch the CBC, but you cannot have journalists being paid by the government. So to have that included in the throne speech was super alarming.
Yeah, no kidding. Let me build off of that because that's a
Sure.
waste of money. And I want to go into something else on the spending side. Something that caught my attention, which was a little different, is a little part of the speech that said that acknowledged how much the federal government has been spending in recent years. That at least acknowledged like spending is getting out of control, right? The throne speech acknowledged that government spending has been growing by 9% a year. 9% growth in spending every single year. And the speech promised to bring it to below 2% annual. So, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, okay, at least the government is acknowledging that it's been wasting money like crazy, spending money like crazy for years. It says it's going to reduce the amount of spending growth, but still spending is going to be going up, right? So, I mean, like, especially after the last decade of just absolute runaway spending from the federal government, we got to be seeing real spending cuts, right? The total number of spending has to come down. It can't keep going up year after year after year after the government has just spent like crazy for like a decade plus. Now, another thing I saw in there was this very vague commitment to cut the waste. Cut the waste. But there was very little details, not much in the throne speech there. And of course, it looks like we're not getting a budget until like fall. So who knows the actual details of what type of wasteful spending the government's talking about. But one other thing that caught my eye is this promise to cap the public service, okay? Cap the number of government bureaucrats. But like, come on, folks. The Trudeau government in less than a decade added 100,000 bureaucrats, right? The cost of the bureaucracy went up 73% in less than a decade. 73% increase in the taxpayer cost of the bloated bureaucracy. So like capping the number of bureaucrats is so not far enough, right? We got to be cutting the number of bureaucrats significantly, especially after the Trudeau government just increased the number of bureaucrats by 100,000 in less than a decade.
Yeah, like the population of Red Deer is now sitting their butts in government office chairs just since Trudeau had taken power. Like it's an astonishing amount of money. And you know what? Keeping their spending increases to 2% or below, I'll believe that when I see it. Number one. Number two, to your point, yes, they need to actually reduce spending, like make it go down. Don't make it go up even by a little bit anymore. One of the stats I love pointing out that you point out all the time was that the Trudeau government had a huge spending problem apart from the lockdowns. Because we'll say, hey, the Trudeau government doubled the debt. Like, that's astonishing in less than a decade. And then people are like, yeah, but what about, COVID? It's like, no, 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 bro.
Yeah.
Before the lockdowns, they were already spending like crazy.
Well, before the lockdowns, during the lockdowns, and after the lockdowns, right? So look, in 2018, so really the last 2018, 2019, the last full year before the pandemic, the federal government was spending all-time highs, even after accounting for inflation and population growth. All-time highs. Okay, which means that in 2018-19, when there was no cross-country recession, there was no pandemic, the federal government was spending more money than it did during any single year of World War II. Crazy.
Yes.
Okay. Then COVID happens, and the federal government uses the cloud of a pandemic to go on a debt-fueled spending spree. Okay. Like the PBO has crunched the numbers on this and showed that like $200 billion of the new spending announced during COVID had nothing to do with the pandemic.
Remember,
So even if,
remember when they wanted to not put out a budget like at all? Remember?
oh, I sure do. I mean, it just happened and then it happened before. Yeah. No, I remember. And then after COVID, okay, the federal government promises to find $15 billion in savings and then increases spending by tens of billions of dollars. So this is another reason why, I've got a bit of trust issues with the Carney government. I know they're still new, but I got some trust issues because I saw this before in 2023 when the finance minister at the time, Chrystia Freeland, promised to find $15 billion in savings. And then the next year you look at the budget and spending just went up, by tens of billions of dollars. So to your point, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
You have a reason to have trust issues. Apart from Carney, like it's the same people. Like I don't know if you watched the cabinet swearing in ceremony, but that front page picture from the National Post, it's all the same people. So expecting a different result, didn't Einstein say that was a definition of insanity? But we'll hope. I'll keep out a little shingle of hope here. Do we want to end on guns? Because I was
Yeah.
surprised that the throne speech that was delivered by His Majesty the King Charles III was actually mentioning firearms in Canada, which is a super big issue for our supporters. So the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we are the OG fighters against the long gun registry back in the day in the
Mhm.
1990s. And now that this current Liberal government is trying to seize your firearms, we know it's not a buyback program. We get it. Now that they're trying to seize your firearms and pay you some money for it, we're opposing that too because A, it's a huge waste of money, and B, as the police say, it's not going to make anybody's lives any safer. Like you go after the criminals. I was surprised to hear it included in the throne speech. Was there a lot of detail there though?
Well, no, I heard the king say these words, and then I had to actually go into the document itself to just make sure what I heard. So this happened during the portion on crime, on safety. And let me just quote directly from the throne speech, quote, the government, will take these steps while protecting the rights of law-abiding gun owners and Indigenous peoples' long-standing hunting traditions. So I heard that. And I was like, does that mean that the Carney government is going to back away from the gun grab and buyback? Like, I haven't heard any mention from Carney, moving in that good direction, getting rid of Trudeau's expensive and ineffective gun confiscation scheme. But, that was just something that really caught my attention and potentially a part where I think the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and our supporters will be able to fight back on. Because, like, as we've made the point so many times in the media, on social media, is that the gun ban and buyback, really the gun confiscation scheme, is expensive, but also ineffective.
Yeah.
Right? Like I remember when the Liberal Party first announced this scheme of theirs, they said, it'll cost around 200 million bucks. Right? And then the former public safety minister, Bill Blair at the time, said, it's not 200 million. It's somewhere around 300 and 400 million. I already see it go up, right? And then the PBO came out. Yeah, then the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, came out and said, well, it's actually more likely 750 million, but oh yeah, that doesn't include all the costs. Okay. And then, well, new government internal records show, well, the costs are more like 2 billion. So it went from 200 million all the way up to 2 billion. But of course, then you got some independent academics outside of the government. Fraser Institute analysis shows that, well, the gun confiscation program could actually cost up to $6.7 billion. So you can see how expensive this is. And like, look, this program, it's ineffective. It's not going to actually help public safety because, like, let's face it, criminals aren't just going to walk over to government offices and hand over illegal guns. No, the gun.
It's not how that works.
I can't believe you got to say that out loud, right? No, the gun confiscation scheme will, by definition, target law-abiding gun owners, right? And like, don't even take our word for it. Listen to the National Police Federation, who said that the gun, this gun confiscation program won't address current and emerging themes or urgent threats to public safety, such as criminal activity, gang violence, the flow of illegal guns across the border. And in fact, this police union, the Mounties Police Union, actually made a good point that a program like this, a scheme like this, could actually make Canada less safe by diverting police
Yeah.
resources away from actually going after criminals, from stopping the illegal flow of drugs, and diverting it to going after law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, you really nailed something there, Franco. So much so that Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has come out and said, no, we're not using Alberta's precious resources to pay for police to go around door to door and bothering law-abiding firearms owners. Like, we're not doing that. So she has directly instructed her justice minister. The justice minister said, hell no. So this is an element of Alberta standing up for itself because there's a lot of firearms owners here. Franco, is there anything I haven't asked you about from the King's speech today in Ottawa that you think taxpayers need to know?
No, no, no. Just one thing I would say to everyone who's attendance there, like all the politicians, all the bureaucrats, I would just say hold on to your receipts.
Yeah.
Because I saw this, kind of look like the big festivities, right? Out here in Ottawa, outside my office window. It looked expensive. I know there was a lot of politicians and bureaucrats from out of town that made their way to Ottawa. So all I'm going to say is keep those receipts. Don't lose them anywhere because the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is going to file the access to information requests and just take a little look inside and see how much all of this cost us.
I
So
wonder if Trudeau's
hold on.
hotel room costs less than $6,000 a night. Have to see. So, folks, head over to our website, taxpayer.com, click on the newsroom because Franco will deliver on this. Okay. So, all of you folks who were there in Ottawa doing the schmancy thing, keep those receipts and we're going to find them and we're going to post them on our website. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Head on over to taxpayer.com, sign the petitions that matter to you, and join the fight for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government.